G'day Vance, Vance Breeze. Appreciate you taking the time to let me come up and say hello and interview you.
It's my pleasure.
It's my pleasure too. I had you first on my list when I arrived 3 months ago, and I'm happy to be here today, the day before I fly back to Australia. Vance, I think we'll start off with if you could just let us know how you got involved with the gyroplanes in the first place.
Well, I tipped a motorcycle over at Bonneville at around 300 miles an hour, and the parachute didn't work, and so I ended up going end over end and damaging myself pretty well. They had to cut me out of it, and they actually declared me dead. And head injuries are cumulative, and so my neurologist told me I needed to find a different hobby. And first I took up helicopters, but I'm blind in one eye and I can't tell where the ground is. And so doing autos to the ground were a little sketchy. In a Robinson 44, you're supposed to flare at 40 feet. And if I flared at 35 feet, I'd dig a really expensive trench in the ground. And if I flared at 50 feet, I might well not have enough rotor energy when I get to the ground and roll it up that way. So it seemed like I wasn't well suited for helicopter flight. But I really liked flying rotorcraft because as a youth, I'd flown in airplanes, and climbing up to 7,000 feet and going somewhere seemed boring to me. Whereas flying near the ground seemed exciting, and in my first hour of helicopter training, the guy says, now just pace these trucks here and that'll give you a sense of the speed. You don't have to watch the airspeed indicator so much. And let's turn right at the tree line here and drop down over the lake. Well, that was my kind of flying, so I needed to find a way to do that without a helicopter, and the gyroplane seemed reasonable. And so I started learning to fly a gyroplane. I got ready to solo in a helicopter, and they wouldn't give me a medical because of being brain injured and blind in one eye. So I had an interaction with the FAA for 2 years over that, and the fellow finally called me up to tell me that he wouldn't let me fly, and I listened to him for a long time, and he told me how he was doing me a favor, and I shared with him that I wasn't likely to give up, and he'd be filling out paperwork until the day he retired on me. And so he offered me an alternative of a demonstrated ability medical check ride, and he asked me if I could fly anything, and at the time I wasn't signed off to solo anything, but I thought a gyroplane would probably be the easiest to learn. So he said, fine, you have 3 months and I'll make up a test for you, and you have to find a designated examiner and take a test ride, and if you do okay, then he'll pass you, and I don't think you will. And so through 2.5 months later, I did it, and I passed, and now I can get a medical in spite of being blind and had brain damaged. And so after that, part of being brain damaged was making an unfortunate choice of a spouse, and I woke up one day $2.1 million below zero, and so it meant that I had to reprioritize my life. And when I got it back together, my second purchase was a gyroplane, and it was this one, and this one is a one-off designed and built by a fellow named Mark Givens, and he just went mad one day and drew it out on the back of a napkin, and 2 years later he was flying it.
So just let me go back again. When you had this interaction with the FAA guy, and then you finally did your check flight, that was in what aircraft?
That was in a Sparrowhawk.
A Sparrowhawk, right. And he signed you off. Then you had to find an aircraft for yourself.
There were really 2 steps. The first step was being able to get a medical, because there was no point in trying to get a pilot's license without a medical. I can't solo anything without a medical.
Right.
And so once that was resolved, then I could move forward, but that's when my finances blew up, and so I had to move backward for a while.
Okay.
It took me nearly 18 months to recover from that financially.
Right. So what year was it that you actually purchased the Predator from Mark Givens?
In 2008.
2008. Now you made some changes to the aircraft, did you?
Well, I put in different seats because I'm probably fatter than he was when he built it, and then I wanted a little more room, and then I changed the way the controls worked a little bit and put dual controls in it so I could get instruction in it, because my instructor wouldn't teach in it without dual controls, because he wanted to be able to fix it if something went wrong rather than just suggest that I operate in a different way. But other than that, I didn't do too much, and at the time it had about 190 hours on it.
The aircraft had 190 hours on it
Yes.
when you purchased it.
And it had a smaller engine in it too. I've since put a bigger engine in it.
So this is a Lycoming.
Well, it had a Lycoming 0290, which is a World War II generator motor. It was built in 1939, and it had been modified for aircraft use, and it wasn't going to rust because it leaked a lot of oil, but it really didn't quite have enough power when it's hot, full fuel, and my wife's in the back.
And this is your wife, Ed.
Yes.
Happy anniversary, by the way.
New wife.
The new wife.
Yeah, wife number 3.
Wife number 3.
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah, my father went through 6, so and his 6th wife killed him. So I guess it's I come from a defective marriage gene pool.
I had a funny moment with Chuck Beatty and Ernie Boyette because all 3 of us have had 3 wives, so
Wow.
that was a funny moment too. Now, in a short period of time, 4 years, you've racked up 1,000 hours a pilot in command of this particular aircraft. Is that about right?
Yes, it took me 6 hours to solo in this, and that's when I become pilot in command. And at the time, it had 197 hours on it, and I've been flying it around since then.
Yep, flying it everywhere, and we all love reading about your adventures.
Well, it's really fun to share it, and given that I have the challenges I do with memory, it's a nice way to remember the joy that I felt, because I need to describe it to people so they can hear it, and so I enjoy writing about it a lot more than you all enjoy reading about it.
Oh, I don't know about that. I look forward to everything you write. I thoroughly enjoy it.
Well, thank you.
Now, you're busy at the moment with another aircraft project. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it's bigger than just an aircraft project. People like you have suggested that I write well, and that my wife takes nice pictures, and several people suggested that maybe we should do a book, and ideas sort of grow in the back of my mind like weeds, and the idea that grew is a book. Well, if you're going to write a book to gyroplane pilots, you're not going to sell but a few hundred of them. So that's not really commercially viable to do a nice coffee table book. And so you need something that makes it marketable. So we felt that one of the things that I really like is reminding people that life's not over when they get to be 40. And so as a 63-year-old person, having a dream and doing something about it is a nice thing. And a lot of people don't do that. And so there's a whole baby boom generation that's coming up now into this age group, and a lot of them are becoming couch potatoes. And I think that's such a bad thing. So the idea of someone seizing a dream and chasing their dreams and having a big adventure seems like a good idea. Then doing something impossible always appeals to people. And for most people, the idea of designing and building an aircraft in your garage is a completely insane concept and impossible. So doing that is chasing the impossible dream, which of course makes the dream better. And then, because I've had a brain injury, it used to be when you had a brain injury, they told you, well, get used to it, brain cells don't grow back, and you're not going to get any better. So they told me I would never speak in complete sentences, that I would never stand unassisted, that I couldn't possibly walk, that I couldn't even write. I might be able to use a computer with 2 fingers. And it turns out they were wrong. And so the brain injury people, I go to a brain injury group where we share our personal challenges and try to identify those things. Having a brain injury is the same problem as everybody else has, only bigger. And like everybody forgets people's names, I forget everybody's name. I forget if I rinsed the soap off in the shower. So identifying those as brain injury problems helps. And also how you interact with people is part of a brain injury challenge. So I go to a group and we all share our challenges and our schemes for getting around the brain injury challenges. And so the idea of someone coming back from a brain injury has a certain marketability. So given all of that, and then in my experience, the aviation community is like the motorcycle community used to be. And if we're at some airport and we have a problem or we have a need, there will be someone there that will help us with it. So it's sort of the America that people think doesn't exist anymore. And so we felt that building a gyroplane in a garage and designing it and then flying it across the country with my wife taking pictures and me writing about it would make a good book. And then to add one more thing to it, it's a romance because my wife's beautiful. And of course all these baby boomers that don't have beautiful women around will envy me because I have a beautiful woman, and that will also add to the marketability of the book. So we're building a gyroplane for that specific mission. I could actually do it with this one, with just a little bit of extra work, but it wouldn't make as good a story. And when people walk up to me and say, well, that's cool, did you build it? I couldn't say why. Yes, I did. And I'm tired of saying, well, I know somebody else built it, I just bought it, I'm not smart enough to build my own gyroplane.
So now you're doing that.
Yes,
And
sir.
we all know your Predator, and it's essentially a centerline thrust machine.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're building the new machine with those design concepts in mind?
Well, I had an interesting experience when I put the engine in this. This is now an IO320, which is 160 horsepower instead of 135 horsepower. And we wanted to put a bigger propeller on it. We raised it up a little bit. When I first got it, it was a slightly low thrust line, which means that when I give it gas, the nose comes up, and when I pull off power, the nose goes down. And I thought that was normal because I learned to fly in a Sparrowhawk, and they do that even more so. And when we moved the engine up about 2 inches, apparently it brought it much closer to centerline thrust, and now power has no effect on the pitch. And so now that I know how important that is, because moving the engine up 2 inches probably raised the center of gravity by 1.75 inches, and we raised the thrust line 2 inches, so you can see where it didn't make but maybe 1 inch of difference. And so now that I know how critical it is, and the fact that it's not all the same, we're just desperately struggling to get it to be as close as we can to the same.
Okay. So dimensions-wise, is it going to be as big as the Predator, or
It's a little bit bigger.
A little bit bigger.
What right now we don't have a place for luggage, and that's problematic. And we have the fuel tank sticking out the side, and a lot of big stuff sticking out the side, and that's not good. And we don't have enough fuel on board. And when you're flying across country, there's not always an airport every 100 miles, and you may be flying into a 40-mile-an-hour headwind, and so 22 gallons isn't really enough. So it ends up being almost 20 feet long, and it has a bigger tail, and it holds 38 gallons of gas, and it's kind of the same but bigger, and there won't be all the stuff sticking out the side. Everything will be inside.
Excellent. And sorry, no, I'll just have to edit that in. Make sure that's running. So this journey you're talking about, you're going to fly from LA here on the coast and head across to New York?
Well, we don't know yet. I don't have a publisher yet, and the publisher will tell me what he thinks would make the book marketable.
Right.
And the original plan was to just kind of wander around aimlessly and sort of head towards Sun and Fun in Florida and sort of stop by Oshkosh and sort of just stop at all the little airports in the middle of nowhere and basically ask the local pilots, where should I go flying to have a big adventure? Now I've flown in 5 air shows, and I found out that I like flying in air shows. And my mother was a writer, and years ago she wrote about an adventure I had racing a motorcycle in England. And the reason they never made it into a movie and the reason they kept rejecting this screenplay was because there wasn't enough conflict and resolution. Part of the sense of drama is to have character development, conflict, and resolution. It's the Shakespearean way of writing about things. And as I go through life, I have very little conflict, but we'll create an artificial sense of urgency if I have to be somewhere to fly an air show on a particular day, and people seem drawn to that. So the new fantasy is to find out how many air shows I can do around the country and hopefully make a little bit of the money back. And so we'll be sort of barnstorming around in the traditional historic sense.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, I just want to touch on the amount of time that you spend on the forum. You, along with several other people that I've interviewed around the US, seem to take particular interest in helping people understand the concepts of the dynamics of gyroplane flight. Apart from writing about your journeys, the flights, the individual flights you have, you also seem very keen to help people come to that understanding. You enjoy doing that?
Well, I've got a history of doing that because one of the things I used to do when I road raced motorcycles, I had a professional license for 23 years. One of the things I did was that I would help people after they'd crashed. You ask a typical guy, well, why'd you go down in that corner? And he says, well, Bob cut me off and then I hit some oil and I this and that. Well, the reason he really went down in that corner is because he screwed up. And so by pointing that out to people enough, they eventually come around to the conclusion and they may change the way that they do things. And I felt that I helped to noticeably improve the safety of it. And I study aircraft accidents, and of course anytime you're off the ground it's inherently dangerous, and I study aircraft accidents and try to understand what causes them and how to prevent them. And I love exercising my passion, but I also know what it's like to crash. And if I can help somebody not have that part of the experience, well, that's a wonderful thing.
So speaking about crashing, you mentioned earlier on you've never crashed a gyroplane. A lot of us have. Many of us have. Steady, that's how you approached it?
No, I've just been lucky. and there were a lot of people. I've been with more than 14 different instructors. I don't know if you can imagine being a gyroplane CFI and having somebody come and say, well, I'm brain injured and I don't have any depth perception, and I'd like to learn how to fly one of these here gyroplanes, and would you teach me? It takes a special person to say, okay, I will risk my life in order that you can achieve your dream. And so I've been very fortunate to have some of the very best instructors in gyroplanes try to teach me how to do it. And I'm good at finding ways to get around my particular handicaps, and so it's worked out. But it doesn't mean that I won't one day tip one over, and I certainly prepare for that and anticipate that, and I wear a suit that doesn't catch on fire, and I wear a helmet, because the last thing I want to do is bang my head again, because that injuries are cumulative, and it'll probably happen one day because I tend to push things. And like in air shows, I tend to push it, and that may one day lead to some mishap.
So when you say push it, when you're flying your gyroplane, what's the best part about that for you? Is it getting down low and cranking and banking, or is it flying above the mountains, or is it all?
Well, there's a whole series of magic moments, and I'll try to define them briefly because I go on and on about that because I love everything about flying. As soon as the wheels lift the ground, my world changes, my spirit soars. It's a wonderful thing. But when I was flying to Lompoc, which is just over the hill, we had a tailwind, and this is with the old motor, and I had my instructor in the back, and it looked like we weren't going to be able to climb high enough to get over the hill based on my flight plan that wanted 1,000 feet of clearance. And so I was imagining having to do a spiral climb or something like that. And then it was as though the hand of God came and lifted me up. And what it was is when you have a wind and it gets to a hill, it caresses that hill and goes up over the top of it. And so we caught that wind like an escalator, and it lifted us up over the hill. Well, now I'll run along the ridge line feeling the lift from that wind, and I'll let it dip down into these little valleys that people never see because they're impossible to get to. And then it'll climb up out the other side all by itself. And that just seems magic to me, to imagine the sensuous way that the wind caresses the hills. And then when I'm up flying, it's not the same as being on a road. On a road you can turn left or right, and you have to follow the road. If something isn't right, I can just turn for no reason at all, just turn. I can climb, I can descend. It suddenly becomes a three-dimensional chess game. And I love that about it. And I love that every time I go up, it's a new flight. I'm not going over the same road. I'm not taking exactly the same path. I have unlimited freedom. And as I climb up, my world expands. And this is an agricultural area, and we have a lot of stoop labor going on. And it's very chaotic on the ground. They're paid by how many they pick. And so they're running everywhere, and they got their baskets or their big bags or something, and there's all this chaos. But you get up in the air just 500 feet, and suddenly it looks like a beautiful choreographed dance, and everything takes on a sense of order that I don't get when I'm on the ground.
Awesome. So you've got a big audience at the moment. There's 2,500, 3,000 members in the PRA, and I think we've got 500 odd members in ASRA in Australia. So we're looking at 2,500, 3,000 people who maybe at some stage are going to want to have a look at this interview and other interviews that have been done. What would you say to somebody new coming in to this industry, and to those of us that are still learning, still newbies? What's the best piece of advice you could give us as we move forward?
Tomorrow's promised to no one. Seize today. You know, just do it. Do what it takes. Don't make excuses. Just do what it takes, because my experience is that it's grander than anything I could have imagined. And I have an amazing imagination, but it's absolutely better than anything I could have imagined. And in so many ways, and it touches so many parts of my heart and my soul that I wouldn't have imagined. So the thing is to just do it. Do whatever it takes to do it. Get as much training as you can, because it's a gift that people give you. You'll find as you get into aviation that everybody who's ever flown wants to help you have a safe and fun journey. And just do it.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to add, mate? Anything you feel we haven't touched on that you'd like to speak about?
I guess just to reiterate that there's so many reasons not to fly. If you read any one of my posts, you'll find that I always talk about the struggle to fly, the work that I have to get out of the way, the trip down to the airport, managing the weather. There's always all these reasons not to fly. But when I hear the magic words, the tower will say to me, experimental gyroplane 142 Mike Golf, runway 30, clear for takeoff, straight out departure approved. It's like the door, this magic door opens, and I'm suddenly in this magical world that's not in any way connected with anything that annoys me on the ground. It's just a magic place, and everyone up there that I'll interact with will try to make it better. The tower will try to make it better. The other aircraft will try to let me know where they are, and I'll try to let them know where I am. They'll share weather with me. I can call flight services, and they'll share the weather with me. Whatever could possibly happen, there will be people there to help make it better. And the rest of life isn't like that.
And that's what you were trying to tell me when we first met at Oshkosh, when I said I fly on my own and I don't use the radio very often, and you tried to explain to me that I'm missing out on so much more, and you really just brought that home to me. Excellent.
Well, good.
Excellent. Anything else?
I don't know. It's terrifying imagining that I'm speaking to all these people that may one day see this that I've never met. And because they don't know me, they don't understand why I talk a little funny and why I use peculiar words, and they may feel like I'm full of bull. And there isn't a way to describe the love that I have for flying.
The way you've described it is exactly how I feel, and I'm sure everybody else that flies a gyroplane feels exactly the same thing. That's why we do it, mate.
Well, and see, that's why you and I need to run up the beach, and you'll have the experience that I write about all the time. And it worries me because that seems, I do it all over and over again. So there's not a lot of challenges. I don't have to worry about navigation. I know I'm not going to run out of gas. But each one is different. Every single flight up there is different and magical. And the world never looks the same. And the ocean never looks the same. The sky never looks the same. The wind is never the same. The controllers are never the same. It's always a magical, brand new adventure. And so you'll get to have a little piece of that. So when you hear me writing about the wind running me sideways up the beach, or a special way that we're treated at the restaurant, you'll know what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, I'm still working on the helmet. You won't be able to hear the tower that well to see how nice they are. But they will be very nice. And they'll ask me what way I want to come in, and I'll tell them I want to come in through the pass, and they'll allow me to do basically whatever I want to do as long as it doesn't screw up their world.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you, Vance. Appreciate you taking time, man.
Well, it's kind of fun.
Kind of fun?